Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. I hope you're doing well. I'm doing great, thank you very much. And I'm so glad you've joined me for part 2 of our story tonight. So let's continue with part 2 of our story.
And who do we have here? What is your name, little girl? Is this your daughter, Izzy?
He said, trying to sound nonchalant. He smiled at Izzy gingerly.
She's a very cute child. How old is she?
He asked. It was Clarice who answered Adam's question. She proudly lifted up 3 fingers and said,
I'm 3 years old. 1, 2, 3.
She said, lifting up 3 fingers.
And I'm a big girl. My name is Clarice.
Yes, you are a big girl. I can see that, said Adam,
gently tweaking her cheek.
My daddy says that when I'm 4 years old, I can get my own pussy cat.
That's very nice, said Adam. I like cats myself. What will you call your pussy cat when you get him?
I'm going to call him Pluto.
Izzy's heart began to plummet. She knew Adam was surreptitiously doing the math in his head. Was he wondering if Izzy was his little girl? Her likeness to him was uncanny. They had exchanged light banter together, but Adam kept looking at little Clarice and saying, what a lovely girl she was. He kept looking at Izzy with an inquiring gaze, as if to say surreptitiously between the lines,
is she mine?
In a silent communication, where no words were uttered, but Izzy could hear the mute, unspoken words in the uncongenial silence. Izzy promptly said, Clarice looks just like her granddaddy, don't you, sweetheart? The 2 of you are 2 peas in a pod. And that random comment seemed to make Adam visibly calm the questioning storm in his head. To a degree, that is. But he still carried on his face the weight of uncertainty, in a befuddled-looking expression. I better go, Izzy had said, glancing quickly at her cell phone, as she was afraid of hearing Adam's thoughts in his head. Oh, goodness gracious me! Is that the time? I'm running so late! I need to pay for these goods and get back as soon as I can.
I won't keep you if that is the case,
said Adam, stepping away chivalrously to let Izzy get past with her trolley. She gave him a watery smile. It's so good to see you, Adam. It's been a long time. Keep well.
Likewise, said Adam. It's very good to see you, Izzy. I can see being a mother suits you greatly. And you've got a lovely little daughter here, he said, waving his hand at little Clarice and making cute faces at her.
Goodbye,
said Clarice, waving her cookie at Adam and giggling at the funny faces he had pulled at her. Adam stood there in the coffee aisle very still, watching Izzy soberly as she hurriedly walked over to the supermarket aisle with a fraction of the goods she had intended to buy. Her legs felt like jelly beneath her. It would seem the crumpled shopping list in her hand felt like a mountain to climb now. She'd do the main shopping another day. Seeing Adam had left her feeling as flustered as a pigeon that had been caught up in the cat's jaws and was recuperating with the shock of still being alive after that earth-shattering ordeal. She could feel Adam's penetrating gaze burning into the back of her skull, and her heart began pounding in her chest as she quickly made her way to the checkout. I think you should go before me, said a kind old dear in the supermarket queue. If you don't mind my saying, you look desperately pale, my dear. Are you sure you're all right? I do feel a bit faint, Izzy admitted. In that case, I insist you go before me in the queue, said the kind woman. Izzy paid for her groceries, staggering out of the automatic glass doors of the supermarket with her trolley, so grateful to receive the fresh air in the parking lot. She took gulps of air, with the desperate gasps of someone who's been deprived of oxygen for an extended period of time. She had come close to having a panic attack. She could see Adam Applegate in the parking lot waving at her as he climbed into a red Range Rover and steadily drove away. She had noticed Adam hurriedly leaving the store, without a grocery bag in his hand, which she thought was very strange. Was he privately wondering if Clarice was his little girl? She was certainly thinking of nothing else. Her daughter was the splitting image of Adam Applegate. "Calm down," she told herself. "Get a grip, girl."
"Mummy,"
said little Clarice, who was still sitting in front of the trolley and waving her arms around.
"the birdie took my cookie,"
she cried out in delight.
"The birdie, it took my cookie."
Sure enough, on the tarmac, a few little birdies were pecking away at Clarice's fallen cookie. They were clearly hungry.
"They're hungry, Mummy."
"Yes, they are, aren't they?" said Izzy, smiling at her daughter affectionately, as she removed her little girl from the front of the trolley and carefully strapped her into a child-friendly seat at the back of the car. Then she put her 2 bags of shopping into the trunk. As she sat in the front seat of her car, she held the steering wheel so tightly that her white knuckles protruded obtrusively through the skin. She abandoned the supermarket shopping bay at breakneck speed, revving up her engine in haste and nearly running over an old man in her urgency to get away.
"Watch where you're going, you silly old cow,"
said the old man, lashing out at her. But Izzy had evacuated the parking lot so fast, she left behind the indignant man and his protests like an unfortunate afterthought that she didn't wish to entertain.
"Mummy, that man was cross with you."
"Yes, he was, sweetheart, because Mummy wasn't looking where she was going. The man was right to be cross with Mummy."
"But why was he cross with you? Because you didn't hurt him?"
"Yes, I didn't hurt him, you're right, sweetheart. But the point is, I could have run him over, could I not? You always need to look where you're going when you're driving a car. And I failed to do that." A day or so later, Izzy had felt certain, after her brief run-in with Adam Applegate, that Clarice was more than likely Adam's daughter, and the thought drilled away at her mind like a jackhammer. She knew where Adam Applegate lived, and after seeing him in the grocery store, she had to find out if he was the father of little Clarice, as the likeness between the two of them was confounding. She knew Clarice could be the daughter of one of 3 men, but Adam Applegate looked like the most likely contender. It was then she had resolutely decided to clandestinely slip into Adam's house, to steal his toothbrush for DNA testing, in a moment of brazen foolishness, where she felt she had to know the answer once and for all. She had sighed with relief when she put the swabs in her purse. She would post the envelope to the laboratory at the earliest convenience. A short while after she had returned home, after having slipped into Adam's house like a furtive cat burglar, she heard the familiar rolling sound of the backsliding glass doors of the wraparound porch open, and Lucy Paget emerged through the door, wheeling in little Clarice on the stroller, whose face as usual was a picture of unbridled enthusiasm and satisfied contentment. Lucy's face was flushed from the exhilarating exercise and appeared as pink as a peony. Lucy loved walking in the woods. She claimed that nature inspired her with her art. Izzy noticed her best friend seemed a little sombre on this morning, as she brought little Clarice into the house. The little girl was chuckling.
"I saw the bear lady, Mummy. I saw the bear lady, Mummy, today. I like the bear lady, Mummy. The bear lady likes me too. She's nice, Mummy. She's clever, and she's got lots and lots of hair, and she's very big."
"Did you have a nice time, Chipmunk?" said Izzy fondly, ignoring her daughter's strange ramblings, and lifting little Clarice up in her arms, rocking her gently on her hips.
"I told you, Mummy. Why don't you listen? I saw the bear lady. The bear lady's so nice, but she likes to play hide and seek all the time, so we can't see her. But I can see her, but Lucy can't. Lucy can't see her."
"I'm glad you like the bear lady," said Izzy, humouring her daughter's imaginative friends. "Is everything all right, Lucy?" asked Izzy. "You look a little pale. How was your walk in the woodgrove? You look rather befuddled, as if you have something pressing on your mind." "It was a great walk," said Lucy. "Do you know, every time we go into the woodgrove, Clarice is waving at something, but nothing is ever there. It's a bit freaky, although I will admit when I'm in the woods I always feel as if we're not alone. It gives me the creeps. When Clarice keeps going on and on about the bear lady, she claims to be seeing something that I can't see.
How do you explain that? Well, Izzy's got a fertile imagination. She makes up imaginary friends. It's common for girls of her age. I think they all do, you know. Clarice is much brighter than your average 3-year-old. You forget that. She's as sharp as a tag. I feel as if she did see something in the woods. It definitely felt as if something was there.
It felt as if something substantial in size was watching us.
It certainly gave me the chills, I'll tell you that. Well, I wouldn't worry about it if I were you, Lucy. My bet is little Clarice is feeding your imagination. She does it to me sometimes, you know. Or it could have been a black bear loitering around. We've had bears in these woods before, you know. They like to forage for berries. But if you worry, take some bear spray with you when you go for a walk next time. But black bears, they tend to keep away from human beings. They're more scared of us than we are of them. The main thing is to remember is not to startle them. And don't go near a mother bear with babies. And given it's spring, you need to be watchful of that, because there's nothing more frightening than an angry mother bear.
I hadn't thought of that. They'd have come out of hibernation, wouldn't they? You make a good point, said Lucy. I didn't see anything in the woods, though, but I did feel as if we were being watched. So next time I will take bear spray with me. But on another note, Izzy, we need to talk, said Lucy rather brusquely. And I'm not entirely sure you're going to like what I have to say, but say it I will. That sounds ominous, said Izzy, her heart beginning to flap in her chest. She had a discomposing feeling that Lucy was going to tell her that she no longer wanted to look after little Clarice, and Izzy did not know how she would manage without Lucy's help. Lucy was her very best friend, and of late had become an invaluable au pair. The two had been inseparable at Arts College, where they were both students at the Academy of Art Design, where they'd shared an apartment together with 5 other students. Lucy was a great artist and wanted to paint for a living, but at the moment she was not well known in the right circles. But it was only a matter of time before her work got noticed by someone who recognised the high quality of her work. By all accounts, money for Lucy was in short supply, and only occasionally had she managed to sell some of her artwork online. She still lived with her parents, as she couldn't afford to rent her own apartment. She had turned her parents' garage into an illustrious art studio, and Izzy had been blown away by the masterpieces she appeared to be producing. Lucy had developed a unique style of her own, with much layering and interesting marking on the work, that set her apart from other artists. She had the kind of parents who were devoted to her and had great faith in her talent as an aspiring artist, and they were helping her financially. Izzy's mother always told her daughter that although money was a prerequisite in our lives, that without following our passions, life was almost redundant. So she wanted her daughter to follow her heart in everything she did. Izzy was paying Lucy handsomely as a childminder for Clarice, as every bit helps when you're living hand to mouth. Was Lucy about to tell Izzy she no longer wanted to look after Clarice for her? At the moment, Izzy was doing graphic design work for a company that was printing unique fabrics. She needed a full-time babysitter, or she would not be able to deliver on the job, and she was finding the work so stimulating and so rewarding. If she couldn't keep up with the workload, there were other graphic designers waiting in the wings that would happily step in to steal her job, and she couldn't allow that to happen. She loved her daughter, but Clarice could be a handful at the very best of times. I tell you what I'll do, I'll put Clarice in her playpen outside in the yard, under the old oak tree. We can watch her from the kitchen, said Lucy, and then we'll talk. She lifted up Clarice in her arms. Good idea. I'll make some coffee, shall I? Said Izzy. Sounds great. 2 sugars for me. You usually make my coffee a tad too sweet. Before long, the 2 girls were sitting at the kitchen breakfast nook, drinking coffee together. The kitchen overlooked the yard, so they could see Clarice in her playpen under the tree, happily playing with her building blocks and her 2 dollies. I saw my cousin Tyler yesterday, said Lucy, biting her lip awkwardly. Remember you met him at the hen party? I've not seen Tyler for ages. He's been working in Canada, so it's been a while since we've been together. Remember he was at that business conference when we were staying at the hotel on your hen night. He remembers the evening very well. I remember, said Izzy, trying to avoid Lucy's formidable stare. Please God, Lucy didn't know about her unfortunate night of intimacy with her cousin. She certainly hoped she didn't. He was asking after you, you know, wondering how you were. Oh, that's nice, said Izzy nonchalantly, sensing that Lucy's steely eyes were pinned on her. I told Tyler that you had a 3-year-old girl. He told me what happened at the hen party, which was about 3 years and 9 months ago, how you had a bit of a thing together on that night. And when he heard you had a 3-year-old daughter, he was wondering if Clarice is— What are you talking about? Said Izzy incredulously. He's talking nonsense. Nothing happened between the two of us. You saw him at the party. He was so drunk. If anything happened between us, it's all in his head. You know me, Lucy. You know what I'm like. I'd never cheat on my husband. I'm not a floozy, you know, and I refuse to be insulted by your cousin. Any rendezvous I had with him is in his imagination, I'm afraid. I'm not here to judge you, Izzy. Don't be so reactive. I've known Tyler for a long time. He'd not make something like this up. I know you wouldn't cheat on Chuck. It's not in your nature to do so, but I know what you were like on the night of that hen party. I don't mean to be rude, but you were throwing yourself at every red-blooded man. How dare you, Lucy? How dare you talk about me like that? I'm not a slapper. Yes, I was drunk, but you were with me all evening, weren't you? You brought me back to my suite, don't you remember? Izzy, the last thing I want to do is upset you or rile you up. But you were dreadfully bladdered that night. In truth, I've never seen you behaving like that before. You drank way too much, and I blame myself for that. I was responsible for filling your glass too much. I know I was. But you really were 2 sheets to the wind. I saw you flirting madly with some of the men at the bar. That's why I said we should turn in for the night, because you were getting out of hand. You really were. Tyler said you returned to the bar later that evening, long after we'd all retired to bed. He offered you another drink. He said you went back to his suite with him and were intimate together. And when he heard that Clarice was 3 years old, he did the math and— How very convenient for him. I'll have you know that Tyler and I weren't intimate together. Get that into your head. It's all in his imagination. I told you it was. I think I would know if we were. I went to bed that night. I fell fast asleep, and I never returned to the bar like he claims. I don't know what Tyler is implying, but it's a barefaced lie, said Izzy indignantly. I don't wish to state the obvious, Izzy, but Clarice doesn't look like Chuck at all. I mean, she's not blonde or blue-eyed. She's got Tyler's dark hair and his green eyes. Correction! Clarice's hair is curly, said Izzy indignantly. Tyler's hair is straight. Tyler has a very distinctive Roman nose. Izzy's nose is perfectly straight. Just because she's got dark hair doesn't mean a damn thing. You've got it horribly wrong. And I was not intimate with Tyler, and I don't know where any of this is coming from. But he is not my daughter's father. Get it? He's not my daughter's father. I think I would know if he was. You're supposed to be my best friend, Lucy, so I don't know why you're questioning me like this. And I resent what you're implying. Clarice is certainly not Tyler's daughter. And it's not nice for you to go throwing unfounded accusations like this at me. Calm down, Izzy. Keep your hair on. I just needed to know, that's all. I believe you. I really do. Well, you've heard it from the horse's mouth now, haven't you? I've told you. And I've told you Tyler and I were not together on that night. So nothing happened between us. Get it? Yes, I get it. I get it. Calm down. Relax. Good. I need to go back to my work now. And just so you know, don't you go discussing this with anyone. Do you understand? Of course I understand, Izzy. I had to ask, that's all. As you say, Tyler was drunk that night. I know he's fancied you for years, so he probably imagined your night of passion. As you said, it was likely in his head. Of course he imagined it. I've known your cousin for years, Lucy, and I assure you there has never been a spark between us. So get that insane idea out of your head. Lucy's account. I had been working for Izzy and her husband Chuck as an au pair, in a manner of speaking, over the last 3 years or so, since Clarice was born. I was visibly shocked and rather confounded that Izzy would actually call her daughter Clarice, after that movie Silence of the Lambs was released on our airways, where the unsavoury, creepy character of Hannibal Lecter was played by Anthony Hopkins. I can never ever forget the macabre scene when Hannibal Lecter skillfully opens Krendler's skull, feeding it to him after frying it in butter, herbs and garlic. That scene made me cringe. I acquaint the name Clarice with this movie, especially when Anthony Hopkins flicks his tongue like a snake when he meets Jodie Foster for the first time, who is playing the part of Clarice, and says,
"Good evening, Clarice."
When I pointed all these unsettling facts out to Izzy, it was like water off a duck's back to her. It would seem she liked the name Clarice, and that was that. So who was I to argue with that? I was thrilled to take care of little Clarice. She's an adorable, highly intelligent child, and Izzy has not got much patience with kids. I think she says she likes children in small doses, but she enjoys adult company and conversation a lot more. She has always told me that she was never cut out to be a stay-at-home mother, and is not at all domesticated, which is true, because she can be a tad messy, and she's a dreadful cook, even if I say so myself, but you never heard that from me. Izzy came from quite a modest background, where her parents struggled financially. She would always wear her older sister's hand-me-downs, and many of her shabby, less than glamorous clothes were second-hand purchases from the thrift store. So when Izzy married Chuck, who came from a wealthy family, her life changed exponentially, in ways she never envisaged possible, and I, for one, was incredibly happy for her. I will say her financial good fortune has never changed her in any way, which I think says an awful lot about her character, as there is nothing pretentious, self-entitled or stuck-up about her. I have seen money change some people in ways that are less than flattering. Izzy, on the other hand, is the salt of the earth, and is one of the most genuine people you can hope to meet. She has never been materialistic. I cannot see her obsessing over her hair, or pumping herself indiscriminately with Botox at the very first sign of a naughty wrinkle that has the blatant impertinence to trespass across her skin. We are both artists, so I guess we see aging as magnificently beautiful in all its forms, and view it through a different lens compared to the rest of the world, much like the spring becoming the summer, eventually sinking into autumn and then winter. All the seasons in our lives are vibrant, in my opinion, and so worth embracing. Imagine covering a bare, naked tree branch with fake foliage. It doesn't work. You can see the foliage is fake, so trying too hard to curtail the aging process, in my opinion, just doesn't cut it, because you can see it at once when people's faces are far too tight, that they can't even make an expression on their forehead. For the record, I love painting older people in portraits, because their faces tell a fabulous story, and I see every wrinkle as quite beautiful. It saddens me greatly when they see their age as something very negative rather than positive, because aging can be quite magnificent. I've never felt that a young, immature tree could ever hope to compete with a tall, stately tree that has anchored itself to the ground for many generations. There is no comparison, because the taller, bigger, older tree has a story to tell. When Izzy moved into her husband's parents' old home, which is more like a mansion if I'm being perfectly honest, I thought it was an exquisite part of the world to raise a kid. I would love to have grown up in an area like this that smells of hay, manure and leather tack. Better still, the woodgroves around here smell woody, earthy and herbal. So what is there not to like about these sensory experiences? And as an artist, I certainly appreciate them all. Izzy's family mansion is a sprawling white building that looks incredibly elegant with its gingerbread trim, large windows and arched doorways. It's where Chuck grew up as a boy, I believe, with his younger sister Laurie, who now lives in sunny California, surrounded by a plethora of orange trees, I'm told. And surprise, surprise, her sister has not had a cold in many years. I think Chuck is very attached to his old family home, and I can see why, because it's sumptuously cosy and well appointed, and luckily it's not too pretentious. The mansion is not far away from the local town, but is in the heart of the Kentucky countryside, and you do feel as if you're in the middle of nowhere at times, which I think is part of the attraction. It would seem a lot of the generous properties in this part of the world are like that, many boasting stable blocks, barns, and sprawling acres of verdant pasture. And there are extensively vast wooded areas in these parts, ideal for exploring with by horseback, mountain bikes, dirt bikes, ATV, or even on foot. When I started looking after little Clarice, from when she was a baby, I'd take her for a walk in her stroller in the woodgrove regularly, and the little girl found it a sensory experience of note. Her face would light up like a Christmas tree when she observed the pretty sun dancing through the trees, casting gossamer shadows over the ferns and forest foliage, or if she saw an acrobatic squirrel nimbly bounding across a branch, staring at us with mischievous brown eyes. Every morning when I arrived at Izzy's house, I'd get on with my job as an au pair for little Clarice, while Izzy got on with her job, which demanded a lot of her time and attention, and Izzy is incredibly focused. She'd spend most of the morning in her office working on graphic designs for a company, and sometimes I might not see her until lunch. I would usually leave her house in the afternoon, so that I could devote the rest of the day and the weekend to my art projects, where I work from home in my father's garage, that I've converted into an art studio. I'm incredibly lucky to have parents who believe in my skill as an artist, and who have supported my passion from since I was very young. Ever since I've been working as an au pair for Izzy, I've been taking little Clarice into the woodgrove for regular walks. And whenever we walk into the woods, I always believe that we are not alone, as if something is watching us. But I kept telling myself I had to be imagining this, because nothing was ever there. You really do think you must be going crazy. So I guess I got used to the feeling of being watched, because I persuaded myself it was all in my head. And besides, if I was being watched, the eye staring at me must belong to a squirrel, a bird, or even a deer that is clandestinely hiding in the brush. Having said that, I always felt that whatever was watching me had a formidable presence and was substantial in size. But then again, I told myself it was all in my imagination. It was on a routine, standard Monday morning, when I arrived at the house and was greeted by Izzy saying to me, "Thank goodness you're here! I've got to go, Lucy! What took you so long?" I wondered what the fuss was about. I was punctual at the house. I wasn't remotely late, so I felt quite put out, as if I'd done something wrong. Izzy virtually pushed me into the house with a forceful thrust. She looked flustered and unpolished as she began to bolt out of the door at the speed of a March hare. "Where are you going?" I called after her, wondering what she was in such a rush for. She told me something about dashing to the supermarket. I've never known Izzy to be frantic about a grocery shop before, especially so early in the morning. It did seem a little preposterous for someone who was happy to leave all kinds of domestic chores on the back burner for as long as possible. I knew at once that Izzy was spinning a yarn and was hiding something from me, but sometimes she could be a very private person, and extracting anything out of her was like removing blood from a stone. I frowned as Izzy stopped in mid-flow, running straight back to us and returning to say goodbye to her daughter. She bent down to kiss her daughter Clarice on the cheeks and said, "You be a good girl for Lucy, will you?" Clarice began to giggle. Izzy looked up at me affectionately and said, "Lucy, you're such a gem, you really are. What would I do without your support?" And then off she was, running straight back to her car. I'll say this about Izzy. She's always very appreciative of my taking good care of her daughter Clarice. And even if I say so myself, I consider myself an exceptionally good au pair. In a trice, I watched Izzy with eyebrows raised, throwing herself onto the car seat, putting on her safety belt, waving at me rather briskly as if squatting an annoying fly, and driving away at the speed of light, in what I can only describe as a tearing hurry, as if she was about to compete in a racing rally against Nigel Mansell. I don't think her car was appreciating its rough treatment as it squeaked in protest as she drove away so recklessly. I was wondering what she was up to. Her husband Chuck had long since left the house for his early commute to his job, which requires an hour's drive in his car both ways. But Izzy's idiosyncratic behaviour on this morning left me second-guessing, wishing I had a bird's-eye view of her thoughts. After giving little Clarice some breakfast, where she seemed to grubbily get the chocolate pear all over her mouth and her hands, she was grinning up at me with chocolate stains crusting around her cute little lips, which I wiped away with a warm cloth. Much like her mother, little Clarice was not a tidy child. "We're going for a walk in the grove," I told her, and she chuckled up at me, waving her hands around.
"Walk! I want to see the bear lady! I want to go for a walk! I can't believe we're going for a walk!"
"Yes, we are," I told her. I put her in her stroller, and we went for a walk in the woodgrove on Izzy's property, where there's a creek and an abundance of trees, and a plethora of indigenous wildlife. The ground is quite tricky to navigate here, because it's not exactly flat. But with the undulating dips and rises in the grove, it always makes our trips into the heart of the trees very fun. I hasten to say, Clarice loves the jolting bumps of the stroller as I roll it down the earthen trails. I think to her it's like taking a ride at the fairground on a carousel, or being on a bouncy castle of sorts. Chuck changed the wheels on the stroller to some robust wheels a few weeks ago that made the walks into the grove quite effortless and easy. Unfortunately, the old wheels were useless, and on one occasion actually came off the stroller in the middle of the woods. I had to leave the stroller in the woods and carry Clarice back home myself, because her legs grew tired and weary from walking on her tiny feet. I hasten to say, when Chuck went into the woodgrove to retrieve the stroller, he asked me why I'd put it in a tree.
"I looked for it everywhere. Is this some kind of warped joke of yours? Because if it is, I don't find it very funny, Lucy," he told me.
"But I wouldn't do something like that, Chuck," I assured him, and he gave me a funny look, as if he didn't believe me.
"I found it hanging upside down in a tree, at about 8 foot off the ground. How do you explain that to me?"
"I can't explain it. It is very odd. I don't know who could have put it there, but I promise you it wasn't me."
"Do you think I look stupid, Lucy? You think this is funny, don't you? Just for the record, Lucy, just so that you know, I don't appreciate your humour, and I know it was you who left the stroller in the tree."
I just said nothing. I mean, I couldn't explain it, so I didn't. I've learnt in life that some things cannot be explained, so you just have to accept them. Clarice is a spirited, effervescent 3-year-old girl, and gets excited by everything she sees, and stares at everything appreciatively through her wide green eyes. And this morning, while Izzy was on some secret mission, she was having a whale of a time, even if I say so myself. It's difficult not to enjoy yourself with Clarice. She's an intelligent, very responsive little girl, for one so young. It was a beautiful spring morning, and boy was I glad that the cold days of winter were finally behind us. I've never been good with cold weather, but I also hate it when the weather gets too hot. I've never enjoyed extremes of any kind. A gentle breeze was blowing against my skin as we entered the grove. Some of the dogwoods, black oaks, beeches, maples and red ash trees were in blossom, and a tangle of primroses climbed around the branches and bushes, and they were ablaze with ethereal open blooms that were being industriously attended to by pollinating bees and pretty butterflies. Every time little Clarice would see a butterfly, she would squirm with delight, calling the butterflies fairies.
"Look, Lucy, there's a fairy over there, a blue fairy and a yellow fairy with black dots on its wings."
I could hear the birds trilling in the trees, and whenever I entered the wooded sanctuary, my mind was able to relax, and this morning I was certainly enjoying the blissful warmth of the sunshine that had clandestinely managed to trickle through the branches of the trees, warming up my neck and my shoulders. When I'm in the woods, I find it inspirational for all my art, because nature has a way of bringing out one's creativity. Since my visits in the grove, my art has been much more vivid, my colours far more vibrant. On this morning, once again, I was filled with an overwhelming sense of dread that we were not alone. But this time the feeling was far more pronounced than ever before. I was certain that something or someone was watching us. My heart began to pound violently in my chest. As we walked down the country trails, Clarice started to squeak with delight, screaming out,
"Bear lady! Bear lady! It's the bear lady!"
For a moment a shadowy being passed us so fast, but with the sun in my eyes, I was squinting so much I could barely see very well. But I did see something, like a gargantuan big blob of black. Whatever it was so ambiguously vague, so obscure. But I was in no doubt it was tall and almost human-looking. I was sure of that. And it had been staring at us. I removed myself from the blinding patch of sunlight I was standing in and observed a dark, shadowy being slipping furtively through the trees. And I found myself thinking, what in God's name is that? Whatever I had seen caused my skin to prickle. But Clarice was excited about what she had seen and said,
"It's the bear lady! It's the bear lady!"
So there we are. That's the end of part 2 of our story. Part 3 is tomorrow night. Until next time, goodbye and good night.